These are dark times, there is no denying. Our world has perhaps faced no greater threat than it does today. But I say this to our citizenry. We, ever your servants, will continue to defend your liberty and repel the forces that seek to take it from you.
You're listening to The Stephen Torriello Show, building a platform of liberty for people in search of truth with a dash of hope and a life worth living. The Stephen Torriello Show. And now, here's Stephen.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the show. As always, thank you for tuning in. So I want to start the show out with a letter that I wrote to the Supreme Court of the United States, more specifically, Chief Judge John Roberts, because I think this is the type of stuff that everybody needs to do. The Supreme Court does not take messages. They don't take phone calls. The only way you can contact them is by mail. And so, listen, we are reaching stages of this country that are so off the rails and so unlike anything we've ever seen. The American people, you guys, my listeners, need to take the time out and write the Supreme Court. Why the Supreme Court is because it is the highest court of our land. The Supreme Court is the only entity that is, as of right now, not been corrupted. And I say that really, really with a grain of salt. I almost don't want to say it, but it is the only way to go. And so I urge my listeners and anybody listening to this right now, if you want to make a difference, if you want to step in and get into this battle of getting your country back from this corrupt system that has had a stranglehold over this place for the last 50 years, then I urge you to take the time and write your Supreme Court. Write the Supreme Court of the United States. And that's exactly what I did. So I wrote a letter, and it's not entirely long, but I think it hits on some really important parts. So it starts out with, Dear Justice Roberts, I am writing to express my deep concern about the potential weaponization of our justice system and its interference in our presidential elections. Just to be clear, this plea is not about former President Donald Trump. He is just in the center of all of this. The integrity of our democratic process is of utmost importance to me and to countless citizens across the nation. To me, our vote is the one thing the framers gave us that is equal to everyone, no matter their status, power, or wealth. We all get one. And I feel like my one vote is being stolen by the wealthy, powerful elite. Honestly, I wish I never had to write this letter. It's certainly a first for me. But as a contributing member to this American experiment, I really don't know where else to go. My whole life, I was told that the SCOTUS was the highest court of the land that upholds principles of impartiality, the rule of law, and our Constitution. In recent times, there have been numerous egregious precedents set and never-before-seen circumstances of what seems to be complete and total lawfare surrounding presidential elections, and it has caused significant uncertainty and division among the American people. It is my belief that the Supreme Court of the United States plays a critical role in upholding the principles of fairness, justice, and the rule of law in our democracy. Our country is being destroyed by a system unlike anything we've ever seen in this country except for what we learned in history class or a George Orwell novel. Frankly, it's extremely terrifying to me and many of my fellow citizens that a judicial system can be used as a weapon like this against anyone. What's equally as terrifying is that there is absolutely nothing we can do to stop it. What are American citizens to do when we are watching a justice system we've been told our whole lives is impartial, equal, and blind, being used in a manner that's clearly undermining those same exact principles for what appears to be political purposes? We have judges, district attorneys, and attorneys general that have seemingly lost their ability to be impartial. How is a country's people supposed to have trust and faith in that system? I always ask myself in these situations, what would the founders do? Well, what would the founders do if they knew the pillars of our democracy were being destroyed by a government they swore the people would always have control over? I respectfully urge the Supreme Court to carefully consider and uphold the principles of impartiality, transparency, and the Constitution when faced with any legal matters related to this election and every election we hold in this country moving forward. I understand it's a difficult situation for courts to get involved in, but it is essential that our highest court of this land continues to protect the democratic values that our nation holds dear, ensuring that the justice system is not used as a tool to undermine the electoral process. I understand that the Supreme Court must follow established legal procedures and precedents. However, I implore the court to remain vigilant in safeguarding the democratic foundations of our nation, regardless of the political climate. This country needs your guidance now more than ever. And God has put you here for these moments, and these moments are yours for all of time. Thank you for your attention to this matter and for your great service to our country. Sincerely, working class American citizen, Stephen Torriello. So I wrote that letter last night. It took me a while because I had to get all my thoughts on one piece of paper in a manner that's respectful to the judges and what they have to do. I'm not asking these judges to step in and do anything. All I'm asking is that they protect our Constitution and protect our country from some type of mind virus that has infected millions of our citizens and judges, attorney generals, and so on and so forth. So it wasn't an easy letter to write, and that is the first time I've ever wrote the Supreme Court. But I just feel like we have reached a precipice here to where the American people have nowhere to go. There is nothing the American people can do when you have a system that has this almost Salem witch trial mindset to where it has corrupted the judicial system, like attorney generals, judges, prosecutors, juries. You're talking about a system that has been completely taken over by a obsession, by a syndrome. I call it Trump derangement syndrome. Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing. It is. And it is infecting so many people, and it is destroying our system. It is destroying our democratic process. It's destroying our constitutional republic. It is destroying every aspect of this country, including getting us on the brink of World War III. The hatred for Donald Trump has allowed the most corrupt, most evil parts of this country and around the world to benefit greatly off the American taxpayer, off the weakness of this country. The American people are divided now more than ever I've ever seen in my entire life, maybe ever in history, other than the Civil War. So it is imperative that somebody step in and do something here. What I think is going to happen is all these cases that they have against Donald Trump, they're all going to get rejected almost seemingly at once, because all these cases are going to go to appeals courts, and they're actually going to have, hopefully, non-biased appeal judges look at them, and then everything's going to get turned over. And it's going to all happen at once. They're all going to roll over on each other all at once, and these people's heads are going to explode. A lot of this stuff is going to end up going to the Supreme Court. And this is why I urge you guys to write the Supreme Court of the United States, just like I did. You can find the address online, write them, print it out, type it out, whatever you got to do, put it in a letter and send it to the Supreme Court. Let these people know what is going on. These people are our only hope. They are the last stand. They are the last stand when we have a system that has been corrupted. And, fortunately, it's a conservative majority court. Now, I don't think that's on accident. I think that was a gift from God, honestly. And hopefully, with enough letters that these people receive, it would urge the Supreme Court justices to set aside whatever they may be working on at the moment, which is probably important. But I think if they get flooded with letter after letter after letter from the American people saying, please step in, please do something, pleading for the help of these judges, I think, I don't know how they'll do it, but I think they may step in and say enough is enough. Because this is crazy, folks. These people have reached sick, evil levels of hatred. I mean, we are reaching a point to where these people They want Donald Trump dead. We're talking about people that are so disturbed, so sick, that they would probably pop the cork on champagne bottles if Donald Trump, heaven forbid, anything bad happened to him, like assassination. They would probably, honestly, and I'm not joking, they would want Donald Trump burned at the stake like they did to the witches during the Salem witch trials. And in fact, after helping my daughter with that report, that essay she had to do on the Salem witch trials, as I was doing research for it with her, it frankly, it reminds me of the mindset we're seeing now with just hyper hysteria, the violation of people's rights, the violation of the Constitution, the violation of due process, and really just a mob mentality. Over 20 people got killed because of the Salem witch trials. Over 20 people. A lot of people were jailed. A lot of people were sentenced to prison. And it only stopped, this is what the key is, the Salem witch trials only stopped when a governor's wife was accused of being a witch. And this governor stepped in and said enough is enough. And it's almost like people like just snapped out of it. Like they were in this drone-like mentality of this deranged. It is derangement. It is sick. I feel like millions of Americans have been overtaken by evil. Like Satan has infested these people's brains, man. And so I just thought I would read that letter to you before we got the show started off. It's like the longest intro I've ever done. But I just felt like it was important to get it out to you in the beginning because this whole the Speaker of the House thing is extremely important, and really what it does is it really leaves the fate of this country up to the American people. What you're watching right now is the breaking of a cycle. That's what this was. Kevin McCarthy was nothing but a cycle. He was a cog in the wheel of this corrupt, uniparty, Washington, D.C. establishment that just goes along to get along, the controlled opposition that really doesn't want to give any wins to the American people, but wants to give all the wins to the lobbyists and donors. We don't have Congress people anymore. It's the lobbyists and donors that run this country. That is why the 5 or 6 richest counties in this country all surround Washington, D.C. We have a system that is broken, and we have a lot of feckless, weak, honestly privileged people that are in our government, in our Congress, that don't want to do anything because they don't want to lose their seats. All of this is all because these people do not want to vote on individual bills. That was the rule in the beginning. So what does that tell you? They don't want to vote on individual bills because they would have to explain their vote to their constituents in their states. And they want to be able to just vote for one giant monstrosity of a bill and then lie about it to their constituents and say, oh, I had to vote for it because it had funding to Hawaii. Or I wanted to vote for it because it upheld Social Security. But when they have individual bills that they have to vote on, they have to defend every single one of them. And a lot of these people are bought and paid for by lobbyists and donors in Washington, D.C. All of this is about money. When you get to the bottom of it, when you get to the crux of it, it is all about money, power, wealth, and status. That's what it's about. And honestly, I think Matt Gaetz pretty much, he pulled the rug right out from under these people. Nothing like this has ever happened in this country. There's never been a Speaker of the House that was fired like this. Ever. This is the first time in history a Speaker of the House has been removed. And these 8 or 9 conservatives, they have to be considered heroes. I know Fox News, I know the establishment, the rhinos, all the people that are pulling their hair out because these 8 people just wanted to follow the rules and follow the law by voting on individual bills, something we haven't done since the 90s. They're actually the responsible ones trying to give this country back to the American people, and somehow they're the chaos creators. The insurgents is what they're calling them. These people are getting a lot of flack, and it's up to the American people to make sure that these people are protected. These 8 or 9 conservatives are just trying to give the country back to the American people. And you know what? Matt Gaetz actually explained this pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and play some audio for you that'll kind of, and really Matt Gaetz called these people out right there on camera, on the floor, in front of everybody. So I got some audio here I want you to listen to with Matt Gaetz. Here, check this out.
From Florida. My colleague says we've passed the strongest border bills in history. Well, guess what? Look at the border right now. We didn't use sufficient leverage in the debt limit or in any other thing to actually get results on the border. The border is a disaster, really something I don't think you're going to be campaigning on, that you fixed the border. Second, you said you streamlined regulations. What the gentleman from Louisiana doesn't tell you is that all of the regulatory reform he was just bragging about is waivable by the stroke of a pen of someone in the Biden White House. Do you really think you've got anything for that? It's a total joke. And then finally, the welfare to work that the gentleman from Louisiana said we got. The welfare programs that they said that they streamlined with their welfare to work stuff, they're actually going to grow. Because while they did work requirements, they blew out those programs with expanded eligibility. I'm real glad you guys didn't put work requirements on Medicaid. It probably would have resulted in Medicaid expansion. And when it comes to how those raise money, I take no lecture on asking patriotic Americans to weigh in and contribute to this fight from those who would grovel and bend knee for the lobbyists and special interests who own our leadership, who have, boo all you want, who have hollowed out this town and have borrowed against the future of our future generations. I'll be happy to fund my political operation through the work of hardworking Americans, $10 and $20 and $30 at a time, and you all keep showing up at the lobbyist fundraisers and see how that goes for you. I reserve.
Oh, man. Listen, these people are pissed. They are pissed. Their little corrupt system, this little uniparty, the donors and the lobbyists and the special interests are pissed off. They're freaking out. They have never dealt with this before, ever. And what you're seeing right now is the American people getting their country back. And there is a lot more fights to go. They are not going to give this up easily, ladies and gentlemen. They are not. Because there's a lot more involved here than just donors and special interests in Washington, D.C. We're talking about the war in Ukraine. We're talking about billions of dollars in funding that have went to these wars over the years, that are going to a war right now. We're talking about actual crimes committed in this corrupt uniparty system that they've created for themselves. This corrupt little elite club that we're not invited to. These people have committed crimes. Now, I'm not calling anybody out in person, but I'm saying in general. You're talking about a system that is pure evil, that has done some of the most evil things you can think of. I'm talking like genocide. I'm talking about wiping out foreign camps and tribes just to get like an oil pipeline through in different countries. I'm talking about some of the most egregious acts to humanity ever imaginable. I'm not saying the congressmen and women in person have done these egregious acts or these egregious crimes. What I'm saying, this is the type of stuff that is happening behind the scenes that the American people are funding. Very, very egregious stuff. These people profit off a war. They use our tax dollars like their own little personal piggy bank to get like their pet projects through. And all of it is being ran by the special interests and donors. Now you ask, what type of special interests? What type of donors? Well, that's exactly what I want to talk about next. So I made quite a connection last night, and I was reading a lot into this, and it is insane how this administration was essentially installed into our White House to get us into war in Ukraine. Because a lot of the players that are involved in the Ukraine war right now in these, what they call consulting firms, are all in Joe Biden's cabinet, were all part of Joe Biden's campaign. And this is exactly the type of stuff that the American people are sick and tired of. There is a reason why this entire system is fighting against Donald Trump. I've been asking myself the question for weeks and months. Why are these people so terrified of Donald Trump? Why are they willing to burn this whole system down just to prevent one man from being president? It doesn't make sense. Now it's starting to make sense, folks. Now I'm starting to see what it is. And I always had a feeling it was about corruption and money to begin with, but I just didn't know how deep and how big it was. But I think the curtain is starting to be pulled back on the wizard here. So first, I want to start off with how the American people are essentially funding both sides of this war. And war brings in money. In the Iraq-Afghanistan war, we spent $9 trillion. $40 billion of that money is just gone. Poof. Disappeared. Unaccounted for. Where is $40 billion? How do you lose $40 billion? That's one thing. Second thing, how is it that we went from one 20-year war, and the only reason why we got out of that war was from a president that was never, ever in politics before? Mind you, one of the only people in U.S. history to not be involved in government whatsoever and be elected as president. The first time since George Washington. Okay? So this guy that has never been in politics, never part of the establishment machine, gets into office and pulls this country out of a 20-year war where we just spent $9 trillion and lost $40 billion. And then within 6 months of this new administration, we are right back into funding another endless war. No diplomacy. Nobody's even talking about diplomacy. All it is just send billions and billions of dollars while this country is in a state of decline, while this country is doing a nosedive, spiraling downward into the ground. This is why people are tired of funding the Ukraine war. So a poll just came out that only 40% of people support funding Ukraine now, which is down from 60% just 6 months ago. So people are starting to understand. People are starting to see and understand exactly what is going on here. You cannot have a country that is in a state of decline like this country is, with open borders, a mass invasion on the southern border, people dying by the hundreds of thousands by drugs flowing across the border, homelessness, the poverty, interest rates, inflation, people living paycheck to paycheck, and then using their credit cards to make it up. Like, you have a country that is on the verge of collapse, and you want to send hundreds of billions of dollars to secure another country's border? This is exactly what they want. This is exactly what they wanted. But what they didn't expect to happen was the American people to actually start asking questions. What they didn't expect was alternative media. Now that there's alternative media, you have podcasts and YouTube and Rumble videos, and you have these content creators out there telling the truth to the American people, informing the American people. Now the American people are like, what the hell, dude? What is going on? Why in the world would we send money over to another country to secure its borders when we have 7 million illegal immigrants entering this country, with 11,000 illegal immigrants a day, flooding this country by record amounts, more people than ever, breaking records. And so now people are starting to understand, why are we going to fund the security of another country's border but not our own border? Now you guys see why they didn't want to give $5 billion for Donald Trump's wall? This is why. It's all about money, man. It's all about money. But ladies and gentlemen, I want you to pay attention to the Ukraine war and the funding. Notice how the Ukraine war is center stage of everything. It seems like they're prioritizing it over everything else because they are. Because they are. Some of the connections that have been made in the last 48 hours between funding to Ukraine and subcontractors and consulting agencies involved in Ukraine is starting to bring to light the absolute corruption with these wars. And the American people are sick and tired of it. The military-industrial complex, and we said this months ago, this government does not want peace. They want war, because war pays the light bills at Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. War pays the bills for the corrupt politicians and the consulting agencies. But after discovering what I discovered last night, after reading into some of the stories that I found last night, it's pretty obvious that the Biden administration was specifically installed so that it can make tons and tons of money from war in Ukraine. These people wanted to go to war in Ukraine before Joe Biden was even elected. And this explains why they're coming after Donald Trump so hard, because it is not just about the presidency. It's about the whole damn corrupt temple coming down on their heads if Donald Trump gets elected. This is why I tell you that this election is by far the most important election of your lifetimes. This election in a year and a half will determine the fate of this country, which has only happened a couple times. Once maybe during the fate of George Washington's war, the Revolutionary War, and probably the Civil War. And now this. The Ukraine war is nothing they told you it's about. It's all about money, the donors, the special interests, everything Matt Gaetz just told you in that audio. This war in Ukraine is about stuffing the pockets of all the corrupt bureaucrats and the deep state and this fourth branch of government that these people have created for themselves. This elite club that you're not invited to. That's what this war is about. So I don't want anybody to forget when exactly this war was greenlit by President Joe Biden in the very beginning of all of this. Here, check this out.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia.
You said that Russia would be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. Are you saying that a minor incursion by Russia into Ukrainian territory would not lead to the sanctions that you have threatened? Or are you effectively giving Putin permission to make a small incursion into the country?
Good question. That's how it did sound like, didn't it?
So there you go. As he's smiling, he says, oh, it did sound like that, didn't it? This man was reading off a script. He is nothing but a puppet. I don't know who is running this country. Nobody does. But it is clear and obvious there is a top echelon of government bureaucrats that are running this country and getting us into wars. People like Victoria Nuland, Antony Blinken, all these people wanted this war in Ukraine because they're all invested in it. This is exactly when it all started. And you'll notice a few days after that, that's when the invasion started. But they wanted this war. This government, this corrupt administration wants to pretend like this was an unprovoked war by Russia into Ukraine. No, it wasn't, folks. It was all a damn setup by this government. It was the United States, this government, this administration were the provocateurs of this whole thing. And this is what the American people are starting to catch on to. And so when I say America's funding both sides of the war, because everybody knows that we just released $6 billion to Iran, right? Everybody knows that was a dumb, stupid idea. Why? Because everybody knows that Iran is helping Russia. Here's an article from U.S. News. It's from December 9th, 2022. It says, Russia, Iran moving toward a full defense partnership. The Biden administration is accusing Russia of moving to provide advanced military assistance to Iran, including air defense systems, helicopters, and fighter jets. These two countries are swapping weapons with one another. You have a country that is right now building nuclear weapons. And in fact, I'm sure by now they probably already have one. They're just trying to figure out how to get it on top of a MIRV missile. They're trying to figure out how to get it on top of an ICBM. But the American people know, wait a minute, we just released $6 billion to Iran, and Iran is aiding Russia to fight Ukraine. So doesn't that mean we're essentially funding both sides of the war? Yes. Yes, we are. And it's not on accident. It is on purpose. All this stuff, this whole corrupt scheme is all design. It's all by design, folks. All of it. It's all for the military-industrial complex. It is the one thing that Eisenhower warned us about, the military-industrial complex. And these people are very rich, very powerful, and they need money. So believe me, this speakership that just happened, the firing of Kevin McCarthy, it is a lot bigger than what people think. I mean, not only it being the first time in history, but it just essentially pulled out the rug on all these people that are drooling at the mouth trying to get funding passed for the war in Ukraine. Now we know that the United States, the taxpayers, are essentially funding both sides of the Russia-Ukraine war. Okay? Does it make sense to anybody why the United States would give Iran $6 billion? Like, this is the type of stuff people are pissed off about. Like, why would you give $6 billion to Iran, the state sponsor for terrorism? So if America cares so much about Ukraine, then why are we releasing billions of dollars to a country that's helping Russia kill Ukrainians? All of this is one giant scheme to make billions and billions of dollars, to skim money off the top, just like we lost $40 billion in the Iraq and Afghanistan war. This is another war that's going to be going on for 20 years, hundreds of billions of dollars, and then all these people, including the military-industrial complex, are going to come out on top. It's all about money, man. All of it. And so you'll hear the Democrats and the leftists that support the funding, the nonstop, bottomless pit of money to Ukraine. You'll hear them say, oh, yeah, but that $6 billion is supposed to go towards humanitarian aid. Come on, folks. Come on. I mean, does anybody really believe that? Does anybody really believe that the state sponsor for terrorism is going to spend their $6 billion on humanitarian aid? Oh, yeah, but they got people looking over it and auditing it and making sure it's not going towards anything. I said the American people aren't dumb. The American people aren't dumb, but we have a big portion of this population that is extremely gullible, if they actually believe that. And so here's an article from NBC News. Iranian president says the Tehran will spend the $6 billion released in prisoner exchange on, quote, wherever we need it. Yeah, granted, the $6 billion that we actually released to them, that money may go towards humanitarian aid, but what that does is it relieves money from other places where they can pull money from those spots and put it towards building nuclear weapons. It doesn't make sense why you would fund a country that is actively building nuclear weapons to destroy other countries. Why would we do that? So the taxpayers are essentially funding their own destruction, not on one front, but two fronts, from an exterior force and an interior force with funding the DOJ that is targeting Americans in the largest manhunt in DOJ history. And so this is the type of stuff people are pissed off about. And this is exactly why Kevin McCarthy was fired. And so we gave the $6 billion. Tehran is going to Tehran has come out and said, we're going to spend the money however we want. But this is really the nail in the coffin for anybody that would support funding to Ukraine. Here's another article by the Associated Press. Clinton Global Initiative will launch network to provide new humanitarian aid to Ukrainians. You know, and I know, that when the Clintons get involved in anything, it's corrupt. It is corrupted. They are only there for one reason and one reason only. These people are evil. These are some pure evil people. They profit on other people's death. They want this war just as much as Raytheon, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin did. And all the other corrupt uniparty swamp creatures that continue to vote for funding to go to the Ukraine war. Now it all makes sense why they want to stop Donald Trump. It all makes sense now. And it's not hard to find, but it takes time. It really does. It took me about 2 hours to make all these connections last night. Here's some of the biggest articles that I found to just really prove my point that it's these deep state actors like Antony Blinken and Victoria Nuland that are responsible for all of this. They are the ringleaders in this giant money laundering scheme that they call the Russia-Ukraine war. So I got an article here from Natalie Winters. This just came out yesterday. It says consulting firms linked to Blinken and Nuland are advising Ukraine on how to spend U.S. foreign aid. This is exactly why the American people do not want to send any more money to Ukraine, especially when we can't even get our Congress to vote for audits. They denied audits. There was a bill put up by Rand Paul. So there was a bill put up by Rand Paul that essentially said, okay, if we're going to send money to Ukraine, then I demand audits. Here's a bill, sign it so we can get audits and the American people can know exactly where their money's going. They denied it. They didn't vote for it. They don't want audits. The only reason I can think of is because they don't want people to know what is going on with the money. They don't want people to know where the money's going. That is the only reason why you would not want audits. You know, that's like somebody coming to me, hey, can I borrow $10,000? And me not asking what they're doing with the money. I mean, it's just insanity. But this is the stuff people have been accepting for decades. Because there wasn't alternative media outlets. There was only the news, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, and all these people are all in on it. I'm not saying the anchors, I'm not saying the news anchors or anything. I'm saying the people that run those places. It's all owned by the same damn people. BlackRock, Vanguard, all these people are all part of this corrupt system. It's a facade. It's like an imaginary, it's like a mirage. It appears to be a system that has checks and balances and separations of power, Republican, Democrat, and all that, but it's not. It's one gigantic swamp system. It's one gigantic corrupt temple. And Donald Trump is the biggest threat to it that it has seen ever. This is exactly why these people have to take out Donald Trump. This is exactly why. I couldn't understand it before, but now I know. I could not understand why they would put all this effort and resources to kneecap Donald Trump in the 2020 election and to sit here and destroy all of our institutions and trust and credibility in our justice and the rule of law in this country just to stop one man? No. See, they got their listeners brainwashed into saying, oh, Donald Trump's a fascist, but none of it makes sense because Donald Trump was already president for 4 years. He's not a fascist. Trust me, if he wanted to be a real fascist dictator, he would have did it during the pandemic. So these people have just been brainwashed. That is what they've been told from the talking heads at the media, like Joe and Mika in the morning show. It is all a talking point, and these people will believe it because they hate Donald Trump, and it confirms their bias. But the real plan is stuff just like this. These news outlets don't want Donald Trump in there because they're all part of the corrupt temple that is making a bunch of money from these wars. That is why the 6 months that we were actually in peace, the 6 months we were actually out of the Afghanistan-Iraq war, we found ourselves right back into another war, a completely new area, and trust me, they see the dollar signs. They see it. And this firing of Kevin McCarthy is the biggest threat to their plans that we've seen since. So consulting firms linked to the White House's leading Ukraine policy architects, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, appear to be advising the Ukrainian government on its reconstruction efforts funded by U.S. taxpayers. Now, you remember a few weeks ago I mentioned this. I mentioned how they were already planning on spending billions of dollars over there in the rebuild efforts of Ukraine. See, this is what they do. They go in, they start wars, they destroy cities, and then we have to pay for the rebuilding of them. It's all one giant corrupt system. It's one giant money laundering scheme, is what it is. The unearthed connections came amidst over $110 billion being sent to the notoriously corrupt country with staunch opposition to curtailing the flow of cash or even auditing where the funds are actually being spent. Strategy papers obtained from these White House-linked consulting firms appear to call for a multi-decade continuation of foreign aid to Ukraine, even admitting the war provided a window of opportunity to achieve changes that would have been politically difficult to achieve. Nuland, currently a top State Department official, believed to be behind the U.S. efforts to orchestrate Ukraine's 2014 Maidan Revolution, was a former senior counselor at the Albright Stonebridge Group, a global business strategy firm based in Washington, D.C. In addition to Nuland, Albright Stonebridge Group counts several high-ranking White House officials linked to Ukraine policy as its alumni. United Nations Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources Richard Verma, nominee for Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs James O'Brien. Despite the robust conflict of interest, Albright Stonebridge appears to be involved in advising on the issue of Ukrainian reconstruction. The firm published a white paper called, quote, Land Value Capture Can Finance Ukraine's Reconstruction, Reduce Corruption, and Boost Productivity. This is what this white paper was saying. Land value capture can finance Ukraine's reconstruction, reduce corruption, and boost productivity, outlining a variety of economic strategies for rebuilding Ukraine with foreign aid packages predominantly underwritten by U.S. taxpayers. The strategy paper strongly advocates for the use of land value capture, LVC, quote, collecting the increase in land value that results from public spending on infrastructure and other services, as outlined in the paper, as part of the aid packages. So essentially what they're doing is they're going to be funding the reconstruction of Ukraine for decades. And all these people like the Clinton Global Initiative and these consulting firms like the Albright Stonebridge Group, they're all getting in before the money starts rolling in. It's like first person to the destroyed country gets the most money. This is exactly what Jim Biden, Joe Biden's brother, was essentially caught doing in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. He was bidding on all these construction contracts for rebuilding overseas in the Middle East. So we would go through, level these cities, and then Joe Biden's brother would get the funding for rebuilding all those cities. I'm serious. This is how deep this stuff is. And so that's why I say this firing of Kevin McCarthy is a way bigger than what people think. Because now this puts in jeopardy all these people's plans. People like the Clintons, Alexander Vindman, Victoria Nuland, Anthony Blinken. And you may be saying to yourself, yeah, Stephen, but it's corruption. These people have always been doing this. It's just part of the gig. These corrupt politicians, they always take advantage of a crisis. They never let a crisis go to waste, and they take opportunities when they arise. Well, what if I told you that these people created the crisis so that they could create their own opportunities? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So listen to this. Ukraine coup architect Victoria Nuland privately met with Biden before sending Ukraine billions in aid. This Victoria Nuland, look, I told you weeks ago, this woman right here is a very, very evil person that makes a lot of people money when it comes to war. She knows nothing about war. All she knows is death, destruction, and how to make money off of both of those. This story just came out today. The White House visitor logs reveal that Victoria Nuland had several private meetings with President Joe Biden in the early days of the Russia-Ukraine war, with the dates of these meetings often aligning with the announcement of additional foreign aid or pivotal policy decisions from the White House. So essentially, Victoria Nuland's going, hey, we're going to need some money for these buildings that just blew up. We're going to need money for that. So make sure you add that into the funding bill. We're going to need money for this. And then what happens is they get all this money in. And by the time the money actually goes into rebuilding the Ukrainian infrastructure, all these people, like these consulting firms, like the Albright Solutions and West Execs, all these consulting firms all skim money off the top. That is what the scam is. It is one giant money laundering scheme, is exactly what it is. It's legal money laundering. It's mass transfers of wealth by the billions. By the billions. You're talking $113 billion we have sent to Ukraine already. No audits. Nobody knows where the money's gone. And the only thing they keep telling us is that they need more and more money. And not the consulting firms. Zelensky came over here with his tin cup a few weeks ago asking for more money. Where is all the money going? Well, the same place that $40 billion we lost in Iraq and Afghanistan war. Wherever that money is, I can assure you this money is going to be going to that same spot. So by the time this Ukraine war is over and we've spent probably $2 trillion, $3 trillion, or even $8 trillion over there, there's probably going to be, again, another $50 billion missing because it all goes to these consulting firms. So the unearthed meetings follow controversy during Nuland's tenure as Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian affairs under President Barack Obama. She was caught on tape discussing cutting deals to influence internal Ukrainian politics, appearing to plot strategies to replace elected Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych by installing Arseniy Yatsenyuk. Whoa, Yatsenyuk, that sounds familiar, don't it?
I got all the good ones. So I got Ukraine. And I remember going over convincing our team, or others, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for I guess the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Data obtained by the War Room from the White House visitors log suggests that Nuland has retained a similar influence over President Joe Biden's Ukraine policy. Of the White House visitor log data that has been made available to the public, Nuland was serving in the role of Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs for her meetings with President Biden. She became Deputy Secretary of State July 2023, though the White House has yet to release the data from that time period onwards. Less than 2 weeks into the onset of conflict between Russia and Ukraine, Nuland held 2 meetings with President Biden. Records indicate that her March 4th, 2022 and March 7th, 2022 visits were private. The day following Nuland's first meeting, March 5th, 2022, President Biden held a phone call with Vladimir Zelensky where President Biden highlighted the ongoing actions undertaken by the United States, its allies and partners, and private industry to raise the costs on Russia for its aggression in Ukraine. Similarly, the day following Nuland's second meeting with President Biden, March 8, 2022, President Biden announced he would ban Russian oil imports to the U.S. despite admitting the move would spike gasoline prices further. So it's these people like Victoria Nuland that are causing all this pain and misery for people. And just like I told you before, all this crisis, this whole plan, this whole war was planned. Remember, I told you these people created their own opportunities in this war, which means I think these people wanted to start this war before President Biden was even elected, which would also explain the obsessive incentive to get Joe Biden across the finish line by all the intel agents, those 51 former intel agents that signed that corrupt letter saying the Biden laptop was fake, and all the other media outlets that were just doing everything they possibly could to get Joe Biden across the finish line. It was because of this war. It was because there is a lot of money to be made when there's a corrupt administration like the one we have in the White House right now. So I remember reading an article about this years ago about these consulting firms when it came to war overseas and where all the money's going. Like, where's all the money that we send over to these wars? Where does it go? And I found this article right here. So this one's pretty interesting. The people Joe Biden selected for his committee, for his cabinet, were all installed on purpose. They're all there to make money off this war in Ukraine. So therefore, they must have known they were going to even be going to war in Ukraine. So what does that mean? That means these people purposely created conflict in Ukraine. That is exactly what I'm going to get to. So I found this article from Politico back in 2020. So this was November 23rd, 2020. All right? This was right after the election of 2020. This is what was so unfortunate about the 2020 election. All the corruption that involved the Bidens, that involved the cabinet, that involved the Obama's administration, all the stuff the American people should have known about before they went out and voted, all came out after the election. So these people did everything they could just to get Joe Biden across the finish line. And then right after he got across, boom, the freaking floodgates just opened up and all the truth just spilled out onto the floor, flooding towards the people about who Joe Biden is and who all these people that just won this election are going to get this country into. This is exactly why I warned the American people before the election. Do not vote for Joe Biden. They will destroy this country. Every gain that we made will all be for nothing. Your gas prices will go up. You will find us into another foreign war. It is because these people, this is what they do. This is what they're known for. This corrupt military-industrial complex, this fourth branch of government that was only hindered by 4 years of the Donald Trump administration, Donald Trump was never supposed to be elected. It was supposed to go from Barack Obama right into Hillary Clinton into whoever else they were going to pick, probably Joe Biden still, because it's all one damn system of corruption so that everyone can make money. So here's an article from Politico from right after the election in 2020. The website for West Exec Advisors includes a map depicting West Executive Avenue, the secure road on the White House grounds between the West Wing and the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, as a way to show what the consulting firm can do for its clients. Quote, "It's quite literally the road to the Situation Room, and it is the road everyone associated with West Exec Advisors had crossed many times en route to meetings of the highest national security consequences," the firm says, and staffers are poised to cross it again in mass. The firm, which now looks like a government in waiting for the next administration, was founded in 2017, get this, by Tony Blinken, President-elect Joe Biden's choice for Secretary of State, and Michelle Flournoy, a top contender for Secretary of Defense, and one of its former principals, Avril Haines, is Biden's pick for Director of National Intelligence. So all these people were all involved in this consulting firm called West Execs. West Execs was essentially a consulting firm that was part of Joe Biden's campaign. So these same people that helped in the campaign had these consulting firms established in Washington, D.C. already, just waiting for this war to start. And I'm telling you right now, Victoria Nuland's involved with Tony Blinken. All these people all work together to create this war in Ukraine, to create this conflict, because it brings in money. And even Politico had a problem with these consulting firms back then. And why consulting firms and why not lobbyists? Well, this Politico article goes on. But little is known about West Exec's client list. Because its staffers aren't lobbyists, they are not required to disclose who they work for. They also aren't bound by the Biden transition's restrictions on hiring people who have lobbied in the past year. Such high-powered Washington consulting firms are the, quote, "the unintended consequence of greater disclosure requirements for registered lobbyists," said Mandy Smithberger, director of the Center for Defense Information at the Project on Government Oversight. By not directly advocating for federal dollars on behalf of their clients, they do not have to publicly divulge who is paying them and for what activities, such as the connections they make with government agencies, she said. But it is also impossible to assess the influence they have on federal expenditures. So these people are essentially, they're warmongers. They start conflicts in other countries so that their consulting firms can get paid. This is exactly where $40 billion goes missing, just like it did in the Iraq-Afghanistan war. But this new trick they got up their sleeves with these consulting firms is now they don't have to register as lobbyists. So they can come to Joe Biden, they can come to the Biden administration, come to Congress, and trust me, they have connections because Tony Blinken is part of the freaking consulting group. So these people have direct connections within our government, within the executive branch and Congress, and all these people that want to do nothing but stuff the coffers of war in Ukraine with money, with taxpayer dollars, is because every time aid is passed to Ukraine, all these people make money. All these consulting firms like West Execs and that Albright Stone group, that's all about money. All of it. And Victoria Nuland's part of it too. She's part of this Albright Stone group. So these people essentially, they create consulting firms and then they get into it in administration or they get with their connections in the administration and they say, hey, what do you say we start a coup in Ukraine and essentially just start a war with Russia? What do you say? It would bring in a lot of money. That's exactly what these people do. And the American people know it. This is exactly the type of stuff the American people know happens inside their nation's capital. They know this. This is exactly why support for funding in Ukraine is waning with the American people. They know exactly where this money is going. It is going into the pockets of the corrupt establishment. Yeah, sure, they may rebuild a new city. Of course, they have to do something with it, or else it would just be straight up fraud. But listen, ladies and gentlemen, when you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, there's a lot of people getting ready to make a lot of money off the reconstruction efforts in Ukraine. And I'm telling you right now, if the Clintons are involved with this new Clinton Global Initiative, you guys seen how bad the Clinton Foundation is. This new global initiative that they just created is just another facade. It's another money laundering connection. It's just another arm of this giant money laundering scheme is all it is, man. And there's so many different people involved in this type of work, like Alexander Vindman. I know I keep repeating his name because he's the only, that man should never be anywhere near any type of government, non-government, or anything again. That man should be thrown out on the streets for what he did, trying to commit a soft coup against a sitting president. He committed a soft coup against Donald Trump, and then he retired like a coward when it didn't work. And they knew it wasn't going to work. They knew Donald Trump wasn't going to get impeached. They knew the Senate was never going to convict him. But they did it anyways, just to damage Donald Trump. Everything these people do is for politics. These people must keep and retain power so that they can continue to stuff the coffers in the Ukrainian war. That is what it is. It's all about money. It's all about these consulting groups. It's all about these lobbyists and donors. Just like Matt Gaetz said in the very beginning, all these people that vote for funding in Ukraine all have invested interest. It is not because they care about what's happening in Ukraine, because if people really cared about the people in Ukraine, they would stop funding and figuring out diplomacy to this, figuring out how to stop it. Because you now have another 50,000 Ukrainian soldiers dead. They're building mass graves over there that are bigger than we've ever seen. Up to 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers dead. And talking to a Serbian friend of mine who was a paratrooper for the Serbian military, he says whatever number they're giving you, double it. So we're talking about possibly 800,000 people dead in this Ukraine invasion. And people like Victoria Nuland, the Bidens, the Clintons, and all the other corrupt people like Antony Blinken. And if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that Jen Psaki is part of one of these consulting firms as well. And then you go through the list of these consulting firms. You go through the list of the contacts of the people that work there, and it's all people. It's all the corrupt Washington deep state. It's all names you'll remember. It's all names you'll recognize. It's the type of place where Mark Milley goes. It's the type of place where Mike Pence is going to go. Chris Christie. When these people aren't running for president, they're running to get onto board seats at these consulting firms. But in order for them to have any type of power or sway, they have to create connections in Washington, D.C. That is why these people are continuing to run. The name of the game is just create as many connections as you can. Get as much power as you can. Get as many connections as you can so that you can essentially sit at any board seat that you want and sit back and collect millions and millions of dollars off your connections. That is why people like Brennan and Clapper have their security clearances. The security clearances to these people are their lifeline. Without their security clearances, they make no money because they're essentially neutered. And that is exactly what needs to happen to every single one of these people. And they know it's going to happen if Donald Trump gets into office. That is why they are losing their freaking minds about Donald Trump going up into the polls. That is why you see Donald Trump being indicted 6 times with 850 charges that he could spend 6,000 years in prison. That is why. Is because Donald Trump is not a threat to the American people. He is a threat to their corrupt temple. He's a threat to them. All their money goes away. All their corruption goes away when he comes in. Why? Because he's the first person in U.S. history that was elected president that never served in public office. In history, since George Washington. Now you've had 2 or 3 of them that served in the military and were military officers that won the presidency, but nobody has went from a real estate mogul in New York City to the president of the United States ever in U.S. history. That is exactly why he is a threat to these people, because he's not part of their little corrupt club. And so that's all I got, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry if that kind of all ran in together. There was a lot of information to get out. I'm going to leave all these articles on my podcast description. Read them for yourself. They're pretty decent sized articles, but it's going to go into detail exactly how these consulting firms work. It's going to tell you who's in them, everything. As long as you're reading whatever I put on my podcast description, you're going to be up to date and informed with everything that I know. Because all I do is I dig into these certain subjects, I dig into these topics, and then I just save the articles and I put them in a story, hopefully. I put them in an episode that you can understand it. And I hope that's what I'm doing. If I'm not, email me and let me know. Let me know if I need to slow down. Let me know if I need to go into more detail when it comes to these types of stories like this. Just let me know, and I will do my best to try and make a course correction when going into these articles. But I want you guys to be up to date and informed with everything. So I'm going to leave all these episodes in my podcast description so you guys can read them for yourself. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today's show. Just to hit back a little bit on the speakership, I just seen up here there's 4 or 5 people getting ready to throw their hat into the ring. You got Steve Scalise, you got Jim Jordan, you got a few good people that you've heard of, and we'll see how it goes. So just remember that all this is to break the cycle. What Matt Gaetz did and these 8 other brave conservatives was just break the uniparty cycle. Okay, everything that McCarthy was doing, it was all a facade. It was all imaginary. It was all one giant scam to trick the American people. That's all these people know how to do, is just talk out of both sides of their mouth. And to essentially to delay. This is why nothing was happening in our government except when Donald Trump was in. This is why you can have one man come in and fix the immigration crisis, fix the poverty, fix the homelessness, fix the interest rates, fix the inflation, all in 2 years. Really, if you think about it, 2 years, because we had the COVID for a year and a half. So all within 2.5 years, he fixed this country. He created prosperity in this country. And these people can't do it. And how long have these people been in government? Boom. There's your answer. Donald Trump showed the entire world these problems can be fixed when you're willing to fix them. But these corrupt people use these issues in this country as an election tool. They want to keep the people divided. They want to keep the border open so that they have something to run on every 4 years. Donald Trump tried getting $5 billion to put up a wall that we know for a fact, because of the testimony from the agents at the southern border, would have helped this mass invasion on our southern border. It would have essentially made their jobs 75% easier. It would have tamped down on this massive invasion tenfold if he just would have got the $5 billion he was asking for the wall. And they didn't want to give it to him. And we're sending hundreds of billions of dollars to another country to secure its borders. It's on purpose, folks. All of it's on purpose. There's no coincidences when it comes to these people. These are very evil, corrupt people that are all playing you, the American people, for fools. And the American people are starting to catch on. Because of shows like this, because of other alternative media outlets, the American people are not dumb, and they're starting to see exactly what the plan is. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we got for today's show. Like I said, I'm going to be getting on right after this show, putting out another episode for you. I just figured I'd put this one out real quick. It was something that I was working on this morning, so I figured I'd put it out to you today. I'm going to be putting out another show. Probably, I'm gonna put one out today, and I'll put one out tomorrow for you guys. There is a lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of stuff has happened in the last 48 hours, but I just felt like this situation was important for you to know as we're going into the speaker battle. If you guys got any questions, you want to reach out to me, get a hold of me, StephenTorrielloShow@gmail.com. Please, if you could, it really helps. Follow the show on Rumble. Follow the show on YouTube. Follow the show on Facebook. I'm starting to post a lot more stuff on my Facebook now. If you see my show on Facebook, or you can even search for my name, search for the Stephen Torriello Show on Facebook, find it, follow the show on Facebook, and just share it with your friends and family. Share it with your friends list. That's how we're going to grow the show, and we're getting there, folks. We are getting there because of you. Obviously, we're getting algorithm to death on this show. So, but that's okay. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way, like old-fashioned Paul Revere's. And as far as my letter to the Supreme Court of the United States goes, I'm going to upload that to my podcast description too. You can use it as a template if you want. Just whatever you do, take the time to write a letter to the Supreme Court of the United States. Take the address that's on my letter that I'm going to post in my podcast description and send them a letter. We can change the course of this country, ladies and gentlemen. It just takes the power of the people. And right now, the American people are starting to get their country back, and that's exactly what you're seeing. The American people got this in the bag when it comes to the 2024 election. We just have to make sure that these elections are secure and that the Democrats and this corrupt uniparty, that this corrupt Washington, D.C. uniparty does not interfere in this election, because I guarantee you it's not going to be Democrats cheating in the election. It's going to be Democrats, Republicans, the establishment, the fourth branch of government. They're going to do everything they can to interfere in the 2024 election. So we have to make sure that we reach out to the people that can stop it. And there's only one place that is, and that's the Supreme Court of the United States. So reach out to them, send them a letter, look at my podcast description, look at my letter that I wrote them, get some ideas from there, whatever it is you got to do, or just write how you feel and send them out a letter. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you guys for tuning in. I want you guys to have a good day, have a great week. God bless you. God bless America. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.